Welcome back to the Fastest Podcast. Today we're going to be taking you through tweaks to the rule system going into the 2026 season. Let's not mess around. Let's just jump into it. Big innovation here, controversial as well, but the FIA will be introducing an AI track limit system, ECAT, if you will, that will basically monitor track limits, and ultimately the final decision will stay with the stewards, but still slightly controversial. Pigeon, do you want to dive into this one?
Yeah, ECAT, it's an abbreviation for every car at all turns. It's going to use computer data, cameras, sensors, whatever it can use to determine whether that car crossed that white line by a millimeter, yes or no, and then promptly give Ocon a 30-second time penalty. So, no, like you said, it's a new system. It's going to help flagging possible violations, so we don't have to watch the screens for 3 hours after the Austrian Grand Prix in suspense. Final calls are going to be with the stewards. They're going to actually apply the penalties if there is a violation. But yeah, it's just going to help streamline the whole thing. I don't know what to think of it, but people definitely have an opinion. So
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about it, and I think something that all fans can agree on, is that it will speed things up. Like you say, there are certain races now where we don't know the end result and the official classification until many, many hours later. So it would be something that would help speed things up in that regard when we're not at a street circuit, for example. So I do see the benefits. Dan, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, anything to help the stewards is, it's positivity. I guess, in a way, it's kind of like Hawkeye in tennis, where it will probably give you a definitive angle or answer, or goal line technology in football. And then the stewards will just give the final, check, tick off, and penalties are applied, or lap times are deleted, or, whatever the situation is. I just don't hope it doesn't turn into a VAR situation where there's discrepancies and then, you're spending 5-10 minutes looking at the same picture over and over again, which is what the stewards are doing anyway. So let's just hope it works how it should. I've got no problem. If you're getting the right results and the right penalties applied, if you go a millimetre over the white line, you've left the track, so you should be punished. It's that straightforward. A millimetre is as good as a mile, whatever. So anything to help get the right decisions, in my view, is beneficial for the sport.
The most given other solution would be just give it more gravel. I think we all saw Qatar last year. I don't think more gravel helps necessarily to battle track limit violations, because it's just going to send gravel everywhere. I think it's going to help. I just hope they don't rely on it too much.
Yeah, I mean, the gravel argument is a good one because, we see a lot of commentary from social media of, well, just put a gravel trap there. Okay, so they go in the gravel. That doesn't really help in the long run because, like you say, Pigeon, that ends up with sessions being stopped. This could be overall a beneficial system. Time will definitely tell on this front. Now, speaking of time, let's talk about the new qualifying format. It had to be done, had to be changed, because now we do have 11 teams, 22 drivers, as opposed to 10 teams and 20 drivers. So there have been tweaks to the overall format of qualifying. Dan, do you want to take us through the new regulation?
With the extra you've had this whenever there's been extra teams involved. You look at whatever 2010 and 2016, I think, with Mana still there. You always have a top 10 in qualifying. So now there's another 12 cars which won't make it into the top 10 instead of just a standard 10. So they've had to say, look, we'll add in Q1 an extra car will go out, so meaning 6 drivers will be eliminated. In Q2 the same, another 6 drivers will be eliminated, and then you've got your top 10 shootout. However, they have added an extra minute to Q3. I'm not entirely sure why, but maybe it's so they can do more runs. I guess any more time to have cars on track is a good thing. Those are the tweaks for the qualifying this season.
A minute is a long time in Formula One.
It is.
Maybe we'll see 3 runs now. Maybe it's to help with the recharging of the batteries. This is the change that we're going to see. So I think we'll have to get a little bit used to it. But more Q3, which is never a bad thing.
Everyone's favourite. I think it would have made more sense to add a minute to each session, but yeah, there you have it. Those are the changes to qualifying. Thanks, guys, for that one.
Something that hasn't changed is the amount of points on offer in the weekend, which is going to be kind of hard for the backmarker teams, because now if you start last, you don't just have to overtake 10 cars, you have to overtake 12.
Qualify better then.
Fair enough.
The point system is something that I think will need reviewing, I would say, maybe over the next few seasons. I mean, it might work completely fine, and I think a lot of us purists aren't going to want them to play with it, but it's the same in terms of, they took the fastest lap point away. Why not just keep it and have it across all 22 cars? Doesn't matter where you finish. There are a lot of different things that fans would like to see from the point system. So I do wonder how in practice it will work, because like you say, it's not a split down the middle between points and not having points. That's something I think that should be reviewed as we kind of get into the season.
I do think adding more points just takes away a bit from the competition. If you're giving points, for people finishing 12th, 13th, it's not an achievement finishing 13th in a race, if we're being frank. So, I mean, yonks back, we're looking about 20, 25 years ago, they had loads of cars on track and only the top 6 got points. So,
I mean, I'd have to disagree a little bit, especially if you look at last year's F1 season. Usually throughout the race, the most interesting battles were happening at like P12, P14. And we were like, yeah, there's no points in it, why watch it? And that's what we did. If it would go all the way to P12, I think it's going to be more interesting to see, because people are going to race harder. If they see like, oh, I'm now 14th, 6 laps remaining, I have a little bit of life left in my tires, I'm going to push for it, Well, on the other hand, if it's 3 places away, then you're not even going to bother. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it would make sense for the midfield, because honestly, the midfield is what's providing us some of the best entertainment. And I think the ideal scenario is just finding a point system that is, proportionate to the amount of drivers, the amount of teams. So I think it's something to review. I'm not saying that they should change it. I'm just saying that maybe that is something that does need to be explored once we see how this kind of works weekend to weekend in practice. But let's move on from points. Monaco. Last year, you may remember, they introduced a mandatory second pit stop in the hopes of salvaging something. Now, it didn't pay off. It got to the point, in fact, where the drivers got out of the car and apologised to the fans for the display, because it was so much worse than just having one pit stop. They've now decided to scrap that mandatory second pit stop. Yeah. What do you guys think of this? Because with Monaco, look, I love qualifying in Monaco. It's the best qualifying of the year. The circuit is incredible. And if you do well in Monaco, you've proven yourself as far as I'm concerned, because it's a very demanding track. The racing is a real problem, though. And we've been saying this for many, many years. And the cars just keep getting bigger. And then they tell us they're getting smaller, but they only get about that much smaller. So it doesn't really help. What do you think with Monaco? Are we flogging a dead horse?
It could be one of the more interesting races this year. And I'm saying that because of, well, one factor, which is cars are smaller. But also, we are more power dependent again, which means that you're going to have the advantage at the start of the straight rather than the end of it. So you could see a little bit of overtaking. I'm not going to get my hopes up too much, but yeah. Could be a surprise for everyone this year.
I hope so.
I mean, I'm not so confident. I mean, even with the smaller cars, they were struggling to overtake when they didn't have to have massive fuel tanks because they were allowed to refuel. Overtaking was still very, very difficult at Monaco. Obviously, you've got the chicane after the tunnel. That's it. That is it. You can't really overtake into turn one because there isn't a main straight. You're always weaving the car. So it's very difficult to get, the ideal slipstream. Coming out of the tunnel, you're taking a gamble that the other person's going to chop in front of you and then you're both out of the race or you lose your front wing or whatever. And, there's a bump. There's a bump in the braking zone. If you've got two cars going into the braking zone with a bump, it could be carnage. So, look, I don't have my hopes up for Monaco, but having said that, with the new cars, we have to hope Monaco's good. Because if not, we have a sprint race in Singapore. Oh dear. So if Monaco's not good, we've got a problem at the Singapore weekend.
The one thing the drivers won't be complaining about in Monaco is battery management because everything's a braking zone in Monaco. So
no, plenty of battery, yeah.
And they will have reduced power as well because they don't trust the drivers to go with their full power in the tunnel.
Now, last thing that we are going to cover today is the new changes to setup in terms of wet weather. Usually, in the past, cars qualify and then they're under Parc Ferme, and if you change your car, you're starting from the pit lane. This new rule essentially means that if there is a certain percentage of rain, you have the ability to change your setup, tweak your setup. Pigeon.
Yeah, I mean, last year we saw a couple of prime examples of people trying to go for a dry setup, but then it rained and there were basically fights in the race. I think Verstappen in Silverstone is the ideal example for this one. So what they have done is they've added a rule. It's called rain hazard. I think if it's 40% chance of rain before qualifying, FIA can declare a rain hazard, which means that if you qualify but then it is wet or it doesn't rain or whatever, you can change your setup, and it's only like ride height and wings. You can't actually change any parts or whatever. You can't change specs, but you can change like some parts without taking that pit lane start for the race. So that's good. I think Belgium last year was a prime example of us needing that rule because everyone was like, yeah, we're going to rain in Spa and we're going to race. And then the FIA was like, we're going to wait.
Dan, anything you'd like to say?
Well, I guess it helps people out. It does kind of stop people taking a gamble, lower down the grid. If they're not going to qualify well, but then they decide to put a wet setup for the race, it takes away that element of what the team can do to push their car further up the grid during the race. I always did like that element a little bit, people going with different setups. You don't know what, for example, if Russell in a dry qualifying without these rules doesn't put it on pole because it's going to rain the next day, and then he trounces the field because he's got a wet setup and everyone else has gone dry. I do like the, what have people done, the mystery of it, but I see why they've done it. It makes sense for the sport. So, yeah, let's just see how it pans out.
I mean, we don't totally lose that potential jeopardy, which is a nice thing because, just because it says it's going to rain doesn't mean it will. Us Brits know that very well. Yeah, weather is unpredictable, and we still have that element, I think, of jeopardy of not knowing 100% if you've got it right, if you've got it wrong. Things can change very quickly in a race as well, and that can leave so many opportunities out there for, teams could be going, no, we got this wrong, and then suddenly they're leading the race because everyone else actually got it wrong. So it does still leave us with those opportunities. So yeah, like you say, I think ultimately for the sport, it's a good thing. For the teams, it gives them just enough flexibility without too much, which I think is important. You can't just, whack a new engine in there and say you did it because it might rain. I think that just about covers everything in terms of rule changes and updates to the system before we head into Australia this weekend. We are all very excited about it. You can find out more about the Australian Grand Prix in our Australia preview, which should be out now. In the meantime, you can keep up with all breaking news coming out of F1 across our socials: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. We're everywhere. So do keep an eye out and we will keep you updated with everything you need to know heading into our first Grand Prix of the season. But thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you in the next one.